Ah, Smart Water Alkaline with antioxidant.
Whoa, that's refreshing.
And a 9.5 plus pH for every way you move.
I did take a Spain class today.
Restoring like a pro. Smart Water Alkaline with antioxidant. For those with a taste for taste. Grab yours today.
This is the story of the one. As a custodial supervisor at a high school, he knows that during cold and flu season, germs spread fast. It's why he partners with Grainger to stay fully stocked on the products and supplies he needs, from tissues to disinfectants to floor scrubbers. All so that he can help students, staff, and teachers stay healthy and focused. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
The left versus the right. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Good afternoon, everyone. Don't touch that radio dial. You're at 770 WABC, and you're with David Paterson and James Flippin on the rapidly spiraling rated show, The Left versus the Right. Now, I'll bet you can't guess which side I'm on. But, James, welcome back. You weren't here for a few weeks. I missed you.
Yeah, missed you too, Governor. Look, it's always nice to be back here. I know there were some people that were kind of holding down my spot on the right, and clearly there's been a lot that's happened in that time that I'm sure we'll address today.
And one of the people that was occupying your spot was none other than the one and the only, the owner of WABC, Big Apple, Red Apple Group, and a bunch of other companies, and has all types of involvements. Particularly, I think his favorite is the for the young people. Every month they have the lunch, and it's for
Police Athletic.
The Police Athletic League.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You know, I'm losing my mind here. I just want to report that.
But that's one of the big causes that we support around here. So
yes, on the record. And what happened was that someone else was supposed to do the show with me. They weren't able to get here in time, and there was a perfectly understandable reason why. Mm-hmm. So I said, John, I don't know, you want to play a tape or something? And he says, no, why don't you and I go down there and do it? And I mean, he didn't have the slightest bit of anxiety coming down here. He sat where you're sitting. I sat where I'm sitting. We did the hour. We didn't even talk to each other about what we were going to say, except, we'll start with the mayor's race. That's always an easy one. Yeah, so we did the whole show. And I think, I've always been a big fan of his, and he's always been very nice to me since back when I was in the state Senate, believe it or not. And, but you can really see the magnetism of his leadership through just going down and doing it himself. He didn't blame anyone else. He didn't ask why it wasn't done. And it was really an amazing performance on his part. I just tried to keep up my end of the bargain.
That's all we can ever do. But no, I mean, look, that's the kind of thing that we love about the left versus the right and everything that we do at Red Apple Audio. It's definitely about kind of delving into these conversations. They can be difficult at times. They can be sticky at times. We know there's so much heartache around the nation still, and so much, question as to like where we go from here amid the ongoing political divide. But that's part of the reason why this show is important, is that we kind of try to say, hey, look, it is possible to get together, disagree on issues, and figure out a way that you can get through it in a somewhat civil way.
Well, yesterday I was out at near Shirley, Long Island. It's another town near there, but it's a long way out.
Yeah.
It would be about an hour and 35-minute trip from the city to get there. And the International Brotherhood of Electronic Workers, the IBEW, was having their annual breakfast. So all their different, types of assistance that they can give using technology and electronics.
Oh, that makes sense. You were at a union breakfast. I was meeting with some business fat cats for breakfast.
Exactly.
Is the left versus the right.
To keep us apart before
100%.
We got here.
Yeah.
And at the breakfast, which the gentleman who was kind of hosting it was Paul, I think his name is Guidus. Mm-hmm. Is it Paul? Yeah, Paul Guidus, who kind of runs the whole union, they started to talk about an issue that I wasn't too familiar with. And the person who was a speaker from the AFL-CIO, and he's high up in the American Federation of Labor and the Congress Industrial Organization, AFL-CIO. And that was Mario Soleno. And he was talking about last year's election. And what he said was, we out here, I think, for the most part, we're very dissatisfied with what's going on in government, very, unsure about whether or not President Biden should even be running in the election, and very concerned about the effect on America should President Biden get a second term. And he said, I'm not a political breakfast, but I'm going to say, I know most of the people here, and we voted for the man who would become President Trump's second term. And then he started to talk about a number of labor agreements that had been signed by the federal government and have now been rescinded, like sent back, torn up, basically. And how this is curtailing the number of jobs for the union workers, and it's also making it more difficult on developers to try to get the project done on time. And he was pretty irate, and he didn't say anything directly negative about the president, but it was certainly clear that they are very unhappy after what they thought was delivering, all of probably Suffolk and Nassau County to him, and inevitably the state of New York, and inevitably enough states to bring him back for a second term.
So they're suggesting that somehow President Trump owes something to these unions on Long Island?
I think what they are suggesting is that he has always been cooperative with them. This is the first time he ever ran for an office where he needed their help.
Okay.
But that they did give it to him, and they would understand if there was now I'm making this up.
Sure.
If there was some situation where like some city said that they had all these electronical problems and they needed to have it fixed, so they had a project labor agreement, and that they would normally be the ones who would do it. But I think they were saying not so much that the president, that they were expecting reciprocity because they all voted for him, as much as they were saying that he sought out their vote and did make one trip to Long Island while he was campaigning, and then turned their back on him. And I was thinking about that just in the sense that when I became governor, and I'm not comparing these situations, but I would go to places and someone would run up and say, "Hey, you've been there 3 months and you haven't even sent me some business." I'm like, "Well, what business did you want?" "Well, we would do this, that, and the other thing." I said, "Did you contact the office?" "No, but I would have thought, you know us, I would have thought you would have thought of us." And I thought to myself, well, actually, I didn't. And now I don't care.
Yeah.
But the point is, that is often an issue that faces leaders. And I thought I'd bring it up today because, we're often looking at situations where how the public sees things and, how the private sector looks at things. But this was an example of a situation where a group of people are, right now having trouble tolerating a leader who basically, as you were, I think, getting ready to point out, he doesn't have to do this for them. What he has to do is make the country run. Yeah.
I mean, look, I think that while there may be some semblance from the blue-collar unions, to just use a term, they feel as though they have a sense of kinship or loyalty maybe with President Trump, a guy who was in the building industry for a long time, is a construction guy in that respect, has some understanding of the way things get done in a place like New York City and how much union labor factors into all that. But the other thing I have to say is I find it a little bit convenient in the sense that there is any number of ongoing problems facing the state government, federal government, from a solvency issue, finding the money to pay for things issue. And a lot of that comes down to regulation and the way things are so overregulated and the extent to which it costs you so much more to build anything in New York than it does in other parts of the country because of the way the unions have to get taken care of. And there was a time in which people said, okay, that was right. That's right. You don't want people being mistreated on job sites or put into dangerous situations. And this is tough work and they should be taken care of and all this kind of thing. But the pendulum swings too far certain times. And that's a place we're in right now. I mean, it's great to be in these various unions and have this sort of like license to charge more than it's really worth to do some of this work. And potentially there's anybody listening right now who may say, hey, how dare you? And I don't know. Well, you know what? Look, I don't have a lot of patience for it. We saw it this whole week where the LIRR unions basically tried to shut down the entire region in terms of transportation. And they're making on average $160,000 a year. The lowest salary that they make after a 14-month training period is $90,000 a year. And we're supposed to feel bad that their raise is only 4% a year. Hey, I'd love to ask these union leaders, are you aware of the fact that there's people who ride your trains who haven't had a raise in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years? So give me a break, okay? And, frankly, when I see all this hemming and hawing and this crying about, well, we delivered you these votes, you don't get it. We're past that stuff. President Trump is the ultimate populist. He's trying to make it so that the average person who might have cast their ballot for him is improving their situation at the end of the day. Is there a means to an end? Yes. But the whole idea of, oh, I did this for you, you better do this for me, and that's business as usual in politics. And potentially we're going to get into some of that, Governor Paterson, with the endorsements and who didn't endorse Mamdani and who did endorse Mamdani and all that. That's continuing to happen. But, yeah, I think that there is some of that changing of the guard, so to speak, in terms of these entities in politics that may think, hey, things are like they always were. And then there's other people who say, no, things have changed, and this is why.
Very well said. Now, one thing I want to point out is that apparently about a month and a half ago, there was a situation where there were very severe storms that hit Long Island, almost up to hurricane status. And remember, there were some hurricanes in the south that were moving up. Why am I waving my hand? No one can see me.
Well, they can on the video.
Oh,
check
yes,
us out
they
on
can.
YouTube.
All right.
Check us out on YouTube.
Check me out on the video. I raised my hand.
Very impressively, I bet.
Yes, but and apparently they came very close to having a blackout in the whole Long Island area. Mm-hmm. And it really shook up the county executive of Nassau, Bruce Blakeman,
yeah.
and the Suffolk County executive, whose name escapes me for the moment.
Is it Ed Romaine right
That's
now?
him.
Okay.
Good man. Good man.
Romaine Lettuce.
Yes. and when I think it might have contributed to some when you examine the situation, that they were themselves thinking that they'd be called upon to come out and make sure that
things were working.
Things were working well. So enough of that. But let's move on, as you were saying, to James. What is it? We've been here for about 8 or 9 minutes? Would you say?
Yeah, around that.
And we haven't said the name Mamdani.
There we go. We're breaking the seal.
That's probably a record for the last
say so.
couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And he picked up the endorsement last week from Governor Kathy Hochul.
Right.
He got the endorsement from Governor Hochul, who then said, we have a lot of disagreements, but I think she never quite said why he was better than the other candidates.
What an embarrassment.
She just said that they had some disagreements, but she was going to endorse him.
Jeez.
Now, sort of right after that, we had a situation in the middle of the week where the county executive, the chair of the statewide Democratic Party, Jay Jacobs,
right.
He announced that he cannot support Mamdani, and he said why. He talked about his continued stance against Israel, blaming everything that happens in the Middle East on Israel.
Right.
The inability to run the government correctly. The buses should be free. Turnstiles of the subway should be free, and the rich should pay for it.
Right.
And also
misdemeanors shouldn't be crimes.
There shouldn't be
anymore.
misdemeanors for
low-level stuff.
Whatever. Low-level stuff.
Yeah.
But still, right now, they're misdemeanors. He wants to make them violations. A violation really means nothing. You get scolded and you go home.
Right.
And so I am had a good conversation with John Catsimatidis about this on his show. I believe it was Thursday night about this. This situation,
like the schism in the Democratic Party, or whatever.
And there definitely is a schism, and also that there seems to be somewhat of an expectation that Mamdani has now that everyone should endorse him, or he's going to get them once he gets the reins of power, as the mayor of the city of New York.
Well, I mean, look, and I think that there is some level of proper thinking from a person like a Governor Hochul, who at this point, it's hard to really see her path to victory as a governor, like when she comes back up for re-election. There's a general...
Oh, well, if I could just interrupt just for a second, James, because I'll forget this.
Yeah.
The day after, and I guess you know this, they asked Mamdani about Governor Hochul.
Right.
And he said he wasn't sure who he'd be endorsing next year.
He said, well, we don't want to look too far ahead. We've got this race first, and then we'll figure that one out when we get there.
I'm going to tell you, with all due respect, if I got someone's endorsement, it would it's not that I would do something illegal or immoral, but pretty much whatever that person wants, and I already know that they're running for re-election,
right?
I would be prepared to cross-endorse.
Sure.
Not right at the same time, but whenever she runs early next year.
Well, I think that that's sort of what has this whole thing flipped on its head right now, Governor Paterson. You have a reality within the Democratic Party that just can't be ignored. You've got this super far-left faction that kind of, hates Israel, thinks it's a colonizer, apartheid state, whatever. Any aspect of civility or even common humanity between the right and the left has been rejected by this element of the left, as evidenced by the callous and hateful stuff that's come out in the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination. So you have a person like Kathy Hochul, who for the longest time has been just more or less like a professional fundraiser. That's more or less what she does. Like in the name of the Democratic Party and her campaigns, she goes out and raises money and tries to be like a pretty face with a pantsuit on and kind of go out there and be Hillary Clinton light. And now she's faced with this real situation where she has to try to mend the rift between the Democratic Party and also kind of somehow generate enough support upstate and downstate and out in the West and here. So it's not an easy situation for somebody like Kathy Hochul to be in. I don't think she saw any other path than to endorse Mamdani because in essence, she knows that the path to victory is through New York City. And, Lee Zeldin talked about it when he ran in the statewide race against her earlier this year, or I should say in the last couple of years, where he basically said, if you don't get 5 points higher in New York City as a Republican than what you've always gotten, you don't have a chance. And I think that she realizes that 0 to 5% that could swing against her if the people aren't coming out because she's not anti-Israel enough and she's not extreme enough on the socialist side and all that kind of thing, it could be a real problem for her. So I think that was her only option really at this point, was to say, oh, I love Mamdani.
Well, she endorsed him. What's kind of interesting is that there was a very close call in her last gubernatorial election in 2022.
22, that's right.
And it was the actual totals, I think, were under 5% statewide, that is. And I'm thinking that she probably, and I would say very smartly, is keeping an eye on that.
Right.
She doesn't want to slip back into that, situation.
But I don't think you know what, and I know we got to hit a break here, Governor, so I don't want to get too far into it. We can get into it on the other side. But I don't think she has much of a chance either way. I think that she was kind of like damned if she does, damned if she doesn't with this whole Mamdani situation. And there's a reason she held out as long as she did. She probably was hoping and praying and wishing upon a star that somehow Mayor Adams was going to get back into it and that she could kind of give him the stamp of approval.
Well, I tell you what, Mr.
Happened.
Flippin, since you are such an astrologist and a psychic and know what's going to happen, when we come back, I want you to tell us exactly who it is that's going to take Governor Hochul out. We're on the left versus the right. He's James Flippin. I'm David Paterson. This is WABC 77 in New York. We'll be back right after this.
The left versus the right on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The left versus the right. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
We're back on the left versus the right. You're on 77 WABC radio right here in New York on a Saturday afternoon as we move into the latter part of September. And the reason that I have spoken for even this length of time is I'm still trying to give our house psychic, James Flippin, an opportunity to explain how the gubernatorial race will go next year, who might be the candidate that can take the governor out in the general election. She won by 3 to 4 percentage points last time. And who might be trying to get her seat in the primary since, number one, their politics are to the left of hers. Mm-hmm. And number two, their candidate, Mr. Mamdani, took her endorsement but didn't even consider returning the favor by endorsing her next year.
Right. Well, I mean, I think that it's going to be Elise Stefanik. I think that Elise Stefanik is going to be the Republican nominee. And I think that at that point, the statewide political mood is going to be shifting even further to the right. You know, if you assume that it is going to be Zohran Mamdani here in New York City, you've got this whole reactionary push from people who are going to say, well, wait a second, we don't want the rest of the state to be like New York City, where they're not policing violent crime and where, you know, every aspect of taxpayer dollars is going towards taking care of this special program. And we don't even have the money to do that. What are we going to do? So some of that's going to continue to push in the favor of Elise Stefanik, where, Kathy Hochul barely won last time. And that was before we'd seen this continued kind of push right amongst the national electorate. And, I think that trickles down to the state and stuff like that. So I do think it's going to be Stefanik. I also think that, one of the things that we haven't really discussed as much here today, Governor Paterson, is just the way in which there's the Charlie Kirk effect that's also going to continue to play into politics. It wasn't just the Charlie Kirk incident, but it was also the violence in Minneapolis earlier this year, the shooting at the school in Nashville, the 2 different assassination attempts against President Trump. This idea, fairly or unfairly, and I would certainly say it is fair, there's a lot of unhinged violence coming from the left. And when you think about the whole issue that's kind of been potentially giving the right a fighting chance in some of these elections, it's the law and order debate. More traditional crime, street crime, subway crime, property crime, things like that people perceive aren't being properly responded to. But when you talk about the overarching culture of violence and the way in which you see some of these younger people celebrating some of that violence, there's going to be a lot of moms out there that are saying, that's bad, that's destructive, that's not something I want for my kids. And that's how you get that whole very important voting block coming out for the Republican in that upcoming election.
Fortunately, we haven't had, and knock on wood, that we won't have any situations here in New York And I think back to a long, long time ago, but this was back in the 60s when there were, obviously the assassination of the president, the inevitable assassination of his brother, the murder of Dr. Martin Luther King in different areas. And in those situations, shockingly, not so much with President Kennedy, but in the other two major assassinations, the individuals who lived in the Deep South, or even elected officials, senators from that area, Congress members, made some really horrible statements about basically they got what was coming to them. And it was, angering. So having lived through
how did the national, what was the response to that? Was it sort of similar? Could you make a comparison to the Charlie Kirk thing in a way?
Well, what I was going to say is that in the Charlie Kirk assassination, I must be have some of your psychic energy. I could feel it coming. I could feel that somebody was going to say something for the first couple of days. He had a show here on WABC,
right,
as you know.
Yeah. And
when I was down here, sometimes, I'd hear it in the hall. I couldn't really remember his name. It was 6-7 years ago.
Sure.
And but I knew it was this person that had the show on kind of midday or that sort of thing, and didn't really hear or know that much about him up until this tragic situation.
Right. I mean, he had
occurred.
a huge niche with younger politically engaged Americans, right?
Yeah,
he was
and
really
that's
big on college campuses.
That's
and
what
stuff like that.
really surprised me, because I didn't know that. And sometimes in this business, you've got to be honest enough to look the audience in the eye, or talk to them here on WABC Radio and let people know. I did not know that he had that kind of following.
Right.
I didn't know that he had this style, which was actually anathema to what went on in talk radio. I'd say going back about 10 years ago, up until some changes, most all of them made by John Catsimatidis, where you had these people who would come on and they were yelling at the audience from the minute they got on. Or if they weren't mad at the audience, it was the, another party or someone like that. And it was so bad that it was then thought of really as entertainment. It wasn't really thought of as serious discussion, I think, such as what we have here at WABC. So, when I heard about this Jimmy Kimmel skit, and it was, I think the part where they fooled around with the video, and Trump was talking about these wonderful things they were going to do at the White House, and I think then Jimmy Kimmel comes on and says that's the fourth stage of grief. That was just totally unnecessary,
right?
And that
was one of the several questionable things that he did. One of the most factually inaccurate thing was to basically say that the guy who did it was a card-carrying Republican who was like a groyper or somebody who was further to the right of Charlie Kirk, or hated him because he likes Israel or something like that.
Right, and the actual fact was that he was kind of that way at one point, but had shifted back to antagonism toward Kirk and a number
you're
of
talking
other.
about you're saying Tyler Robinson.
Tyler Robinson, yes.
Others reporting to suggest that he was significantly right-wing at one point?
I wouldn't say he was significantly.
I mean, his parents are Republican.
Right. But that he was basically, conservative.
Okay.
That kind of thing.
I wasn't really aware of that.
Didn't advocate for anything. And then it's like a switch went off and he went hard the other way. Mm-hmm. And at a certain point, he said in advance that Kirk was coming to speak there, and I believe he said, I want to do something about that, or, where the words didn't directly say that he was going to do something, but meanwhile, unknown to anyone other than him, he was thinking of doing something.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that the things that we do know about the case are whatever. They've been hashed out many times over.
Right.
And it's almost like at this point, that there's going to be more to come in terms of what happened or what didn't happen. They're going to look at all his different text messages, the text messages between the shooter and his roommate, lover, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever it is. That's going to continue to get looked at. But I think that the bigger thing, there's a few things that I want to respond to with, like, first of all, the Jimmy Kimmel thing. This was just a convenient move by Jimmy Kimmel. These late night talk shows are completely upside down in terms of the money that goes into them. The production budget, the money that these guys get paid, whether it's Fallon or Colbert or Kimmel, the Johnny Carson era is done.
And the ratings,
Jay Leno era
the ratings
is done.
aren't that good anymore.
No. What did you used to do back in the day, Governor Paterson? You get home at the end of the day, sit down in your apartment. Maybe you were up working late that night or something. You went out to the bar for a drink, and there's not much else on. There was nothing else on. You were going to listen to the radio maybe, or you were going to watch Johnny Carson on TV, or then later it was Letterman and Leno and all that kind of stuff.
But really,
it's not like that anymore. People have their Netflix, people have their Amazon Prime, whatever.
Exactly.
So these guys they're going to get fired. Jimmy Kimmel was on his way to that show ending. So what's a way to go out on a bang? Basically be as big a scumbag as you possibly can be and bend to the left, because that's the world we live in now. So you want to be a content creator on the right, or you want to be a content creator on the left. You had Tucker Carlson who got fired and he started up his podcast. Then this guy, Jimmy Kimmel, thinks he's going to do the same thing on the left. So we'll see if it works out for him.
Well, back to the question you asked me. When I would come home and whatever was on, Johnny Carson's monologue, which would come on at 11:30, right after the 11 o'clock news, was must-see TV every single night.
Yeah.
And I think what made his monologue so dynamic was he would give it as if he was a newsman. It was, he would be very serious and then sneak something in that made you crack up laughing.
Yeah, right.
And also, I honestly don't remember any major complaint coming from Republicans or Democrats about Carson.
Yeah. Well, he famously worked to try to avoid that bias, right? Like, I guess it was his perspective on it. And it's a different era, different time. Broadcasting meant appealing to the masses and trying to get as many different people to like what you were doing at that moment. So it was a different game than it is nowadays, where everybody goes for the content that they want specifically. But yeah, I think that you're spot on in saying it that way. He treated it as something different. I also just want to say that I think this is the problem with the entire thing we're talking about right now. Everybody takes this stuff extremely seriously. A lot of people believe that it's a life or death struggle. So Charlie Kirk speaking out against, let's say, transgender things and suggesting that, that's to be looked at twice and that society should actually reevaluate how we treat that whole thing. Some people say, oh, you're killing kids. You're forcing them to commit suicide through your callousness and your cruelty and all this kind of thing. So when you believe that, and when you internalize that belief, and when you really actually think that you're up against some sort of evil force, and the powers that be, whether it's the TV, the internet, the movie, whatever it is, the music that you listen to is telling you you're right for believing that, you're going to go to some pretty extreme lengths to stop that person from being a bad, destructive person. So Jimmy Kimmel, just like that shooter in Utah, but maybe obviously to a lesser extent, thinks, I'm not too worried about what these people want to complain about. I'm not too worried about if I lose my job. I'm not too worried about this because I'm doing something that the generations ahead of me will thank me for, will be so much better off for by me doing it this way. And when you have that sense of self-validating belief, you go to the end of the earth to make things happen. So I don't know exactly what the answer is to that, but some people are so entrenched in their beliefs that they're sort of not even willing to go to the extreme length. They think they must go to the extreme length to make things happen.
Well, I know that after the assassination, which I believe was last Wednesday, that the couple of days after that, I was just thinking, I just hope people will recognize that this was an American like the rest of us, he was expressing his viewpoint under the First Amendment that covers all of us, and that these are the positions that he took. I was fascinated by this connection that he had with younger people and vis-a-vis younger voters. Mm-hmm. I was also impressed with the way he didn't explode and to get into, big antagonistic confrontations with people as much as he would say, well, I don't really agree with that much. Explain this to me some more. Convince me, and then the kids would try to do it. On a couple occasions, his humanity was that he respected what the other people said that were different from him. And that's what I thought, for me, was the biggest part of that tragedy. That he was a person that really was not out to, say something so antagonistic and vile or racist or sexist that, he would get, what's the new term? He'd get
clickbait or whatever.
Yeah, that kind of thing.
No, look, this was a guy who I think that there are people who are provocateurs for provocateurs' sake, right? And some people who just want to shake it up, watch the whole thing burn, step away, maybe get a few views out of it, make some money off of it, grow their popularity, and wash, rinse, and repeat. That whole shock jock argument that we've heard about for years in radio and media. Kirk was not that type of guy. He was a guy who I think was firm in his beliefs and was not above being a little bit snarky about things while discussing it with people. But the point that I was trying to make earlier, and probably not that effectively, is I think that the right is the only place that you really need to actually do that. The right of center paradigm is the only place that actually needs to be able to calmly and collectively make points about the positions that they hold, because the orthodoxy and the cultural hegemony is on the side of the left. So thou shalt not say anything about transgender because you're going to try to get kids to commit suicide, and you're an evil bigot, and you're the kind of person that hates humanity and all this kind of stuff. And, thou shalt not lift up your Christian values because you're just destroying Muslims, or, trying to make it so that atheists don't have anything to say and all this kind of thing. So there's a need from people who are on the right to be able to actually calmly and collectively step up and defend their beliefs. And that's the cultural landscape that we're in.
Very well stated. Coming from the right, but wrong. By James Flippin. We'll be back right after our commercial message. We're on WABC having a good time with the left versus the right.
The Left versus the Right on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Left versus the Right. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
We're back on The Left versus the Right. Our guest and basically co-host of the show these days is with us, James Flippin. And we have heard an oratory from Mr. Flippin the past couple of minutes.
I'm getting off my soapbox now.
Honestly, I'm really not as critical of that as you would think.
Okay.
I think that there is, there's sometimes there are sort of waves of activity in society, and let's say when I was a teenager in the late 60s and I first became interested in politics and that kind of thing, the conservatives seemed so angry all the time.
Right.
Everything upset them and that kind of thing. The conservative, though, who I liked, I got a kick out of him, was William F. Buckley Jr.
Okay.
He could literally emasculate people and didn't say anything, louder than the last sentence, and people would sit there. First of all, he was such an intellectual, they couldn't even figure out what he was talking about.
Yeah, right.
He's like, you are very loquacious.
Right.
Another person's there with a dictionary trying to figure out what he's saying. But he was someone who I personally got a kick out of, even though he had conservative views that I didn't necessarily care. And actually, my whole feeling about society is if the interactions between the parties parties were more competitive and less vindictive, we could actually get somewhere in this world.
Pretty good point.
You know, in other words, trying to show the other side that there's a better way than what they're thinking. Mm-hmm. The other side comes back and says, well, we checked that out. That doesn't work. Mm-hmm. All right, let's go on to something else. But that's not the case right now.
No.
There's a lot of personal bitterness, I think, that's developing. Although I would say, and I wonder what your thought is on this one.
Personal and institutional, I just want to say. Personal and institutional, I think. But go ahead.
That on talk radio, I see a dramatic improvement over the last, say, 5 or 10 years. And not trying to be obsequious, as Mr. Buckley would have said.
Yes.
But not much of it at WABC. There were a couple of times, I'm listening to someone and they're just kind of going on, and they never seem to get to the point. Mm-hmm. But I think that's why I think the medium has brought a lot of TV watchers back to radio. And also why I don't understand what this whole effort is in Washington, D.C., to get rid of AM radio.
Well, I mean, I think that there are any number of true explanations behind the push behind let's eliminate AM radio, right? I think that the car makers see it as they don't want to have to worry about an additional band when they're already focusing on FM and setting people up to have their phones plug into the console. Right. And, what do we need to worry about having an AM?
AM's almost a last resort.
Yeah, like in essence, it's something that they just don't want to have to worry about. Now, in essence, what we've said is, as representatives of AM radio, well, there's a lot to be said for its role in emergency applications, right? The way the sound waves travel through the ground, there's less concern in a electrical outlet or outage, I should say, or if there's some sort of an EMP that really takes out and fries a lot of this high-level electronics, you might still be able to pick up a broadcast on an AM radio. So, that all being set aside, it is kind of interesting when you think about what you're talking about. Now, I wanted to ask a question in response to your point. You're saying that you think there's actually more belligerence on the right in the last 5 or 6 years?
No.
Less?
I think there's less, and I think all the way around that the discussions are, I think, more informed and less acrimonious than they were before. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's still disagreement. What it was also interesting, back, some years ago, there were these individuals, they really weren't bad, but they tried to act that way.
Right.
Like Bo Dietl. He's always yelling and screaming at somebody.
Sure.
Somebody did this wrong or that or something like that.
Right.
He's one. Senator Al D'Amato, he could have these tantrums when he was carrying on and talking. And,
of course.
And I had to interview him a few times. And then as soon as we paused for commercials, Davey, what do you want to do after the show? Maybe we'll have a little drink. Well, he's someone who I just think the world of. He's just a really terrific person and really went out of his way to help me when I was governor. He didn't have to, and I had a lot of problems. He could have jumped on the bandwagon or more. It felt like a Mack truck and roll over me, but he didn't. And on a few occasions where he really believed it, he was able to come to my defense. But what I was really saying is I thought that the atmosphere had tempered, but now with this Kirk assassination, and the thing that gets me about the Kirk assassination is that by killing him, yes, he had a movement. There were a lot of people following it. It has multiplied logarithmically since his death, which is good. But he wasn't the governor of some state.
Right.
He wasn't, like an attorney general who put someone from the other side in jail,
right,
or something like that. He is basically a guy who started an organization, was extremely loquacious about his stances, got a lot of attention for it. I think was like, I never heard anybody talk about him, the way they would talk about people years ago,
right,
who they thought were.
Well, in essence, I think I have an answer to that, why that is, Governor Paterson. And in essence, it's because of the effectiveness and the power and the influence behind the message that Charlie Kirk spread and the people that he was speaking to. And there's some element of society, should it bend to the left or be focused on political causes that bend to the left, that can't tolerate that. Can't tolerate a well-spoken, calm person in a lucid fashion explaining the conviction of their beliefs about fatherhood, what it is to be a masculine man, Christianity, politics, race, gender, all this kind of things. The fact that it was being received in some level on a positive way or in a positive way, and even that level of discourse was considered positive, is something that people on the left, the far left anyway, because let's just show proper deference to our discussion here today, Governor Paterson.
Okay.
They can't tolerate that. You can't tolerate any dissension in the ranks when you're talking about the orthodoxy that is the left. And that's the point I'm trying to make. For Charlie Kirk to say, look, it's just the way I see it. You're entitled to your beliefs, but I feel that there's something to be said for men raising families, looking to get married, looking to help provide for their wife, looking to help teach their kids that this is the American values that we hold dear, all this kind of stuff. Even though that sounds pretty basic to you or me, there's some people that see that as truly radical, truly hate-filled, truly bigoted. And my point is that he was assassinated for having the wrong beliefs. It didn't matter that he wasn't a politician. It didn't matter that he wasn't writing policy. It didn't even matter that he might one day run for president, which is something we've been hearing a lot of people talk about, that President Trump told him, Charlie, you're going to be president one day. That all doesn't matter. In a weird way, people that are perpetually engaged in this kind of stuff, they give a pass to the politician. It's almost like that's a necessary evil. They're a pawn on the chessboard. But be an influencer, be somebody who actually speaks to the hearts and minds of the people that do cast their votes, especially when you're speaking to people under the age of 30 who are so-called formulating the next generation, that we can't tolerate. And that's why he was cut down.
Well, it's been about a week and a half since he was cut down. And, of course, he leaves behind him a wife and a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. I mean, hearing that, it's hard to carry on a conversation after you hear that. But what I would say is they then showed some of his speeches and some of his interactions with other people. Mm-hmm. And I thought to myself, you know what? I would have gotten along with that guy. I think he and
you're right, by the way.
What?
I think you're right about that.
Yeah, he and I could I get along with you. How about that?
But can I say something about that, Governor Paterson?
Sure.
I really just want to jump in on that because it's something that I did a video on TikTok about, and it's worth sharing here. In life, and I think you could speak to this, right? Because you're a guy who's a lifelong Democrat, ran the state of New York as a Democrat, and yet here you are in the halls of 77 WABC every day rubbing elbows with people who are very far right of center, MAGA members. You're part of that show at 5 p.m. that obviously bends to the right, but tries its best to stay balanced. And you're seeing the way that type of interaction goes down. Life is disagreement. Life is learning to operate within the realm of people that don't always see things the same way that you do. And you keep it civil, you keep it positive, you keep it loving. Families go through that. Couples go through that. Countries go through that.
Right.
So when you think about a guy like Charlie Kirk, I'm a guy who, as conservative as they come, I voted for President Trump 3 times now in my life.
In that one election.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, that's why he won in 2024.
Hey, keep that quiet. No, but that being said, this is a guy, Charlie Kirk, that I didn't necessarily see eye to eye on the gay marriage issue. You know what I mean? I'm gay married. I'm married to a man. I am open and honest about the way I see that issue. I think it speaks to the need and desire to form a family and have something more than just the hedonistic pursuits that are out there, so to speak. And I talk a lot about what the Christians see in my mind as sin ranking, where you're putting this whole idea of that particular sin ahead of other sins. And so I would have loved to have had that discussion with Charlie Kirk. And I think we could have had that discussion. And I think it would have been really productive for both of us. But unfortunately, we're not going to have that chance. Yeah.
And, the unfortunate situation that occurs, I have a very close friend who's gay, but he's pretty, progressive in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that he laments is that he hasn't been able to really connect with someone and have that kind of partnership. Mm. And he seems very happy about people who can. Mm. So he's not bitter toward anybody or anything like that.
And let me just say quickly, just to interject, that I try to lift up people who maybe they are more of the political left, but in the 60s, when you had such a push for civil rights and a changing of the minds surrounding libertarian principles and pushback against bigotry, whatever, I benefit from the legacy of the work that was done there. So shout to your friend and anybody else who's lived through that, the way we have changed as a society. It's important to note that. So, yeah, I totally understand where that guy's coming from.
Yeah. And, so really things are a little more complicated than what we think, at first glance. Mm-hmm. And so here's a man who I said I would hear him walking up and down the halls here. I would, I knew that he existed.
Kirk, you're talking about.
Kirk. Yeah. I didn't know that much about him. I found myself profoundly crestfallen for this last weekend, mm-hmm. right after that situation. And because he was a human being, he went further than a whole lot of other people did in a number of areas. He reached people. He touched people, and just the viciousness of killing someone with a bullet from so far away that it took a few days to find the shooter. Mm. It's just unnerving.
Yeah. Well,
I was just going to say we're on the left versus the right. We're out of time, but stay tuned. John Sterling's going to come on and talk to all of you. Have a great Saturday.
Thanks for listening to The Left versus the Right. You can hear The Left versus the Right Saturday afternoons at 4. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?